This is the only Fortnite optimization guide you will ever need. I've made several highly rated optimization guides, and today I'm going to show you every single thing I did to get over 1500 FPS, and I did it on a $750 PC. I've tested all these optimizations across 5 different builds, both desktops and laptops, to ensure that these tips work no matter what system you're using. After following this video, not only will you see a significant boost in FPS and decrease in latency, but my goal is to make your FPS just as stable as mine, so you will never have to watch another one of these videos ever again. I know this is probably the 80 billionth time someone told you to go into your Fortnite settings, but this will be the last time because we're going a lot deeper, and I'm going to show you how I get 1% lows above 200 FPS and insanely low input delay. And it all starts with fully optimizing your Fortnite settings. Open the game and go to your settings, and here you will see all of your display settings. For window mode, you can choose between windowed full screen and exclusive full screen, but it will depend on your specific computer, as some people will see better FPS using one or the other, and this is the exact reason why even pro players can't seem to agree on just one window mode. For now, stick to whichever one gives you better FPS. However, if you have multiple monitors, you may want to stick on windowed full screen no matter what, since it lets you seamlessly move your mouse across monitors. If you choose windowed full screen, it will automatically select your resolution size, but if you switch to full screen, make sure to select your monitor's native resolution. It might be tempting to reduce it to increase your FPS, but using a different resolution to your monitor can sometimes make things like text look blurry. But if you're seeing a performance hit because your computer just isn't good enough, we'll fix this issue by instead changing the 3D resolution setting in just a moment. The next setting is VSync, and you probably know what it does at this point, but as a quick refresher, it ensures that every frame you see on your screen is a full frame, which can help with screen tearing. However, VSync will increase your latency because it makes your computer wait for a full frame to render before it appears on your monitor, making it much worse compared to having it off. You'll see that with VSync on, we do get marginally better process latency, but worse ISR latency and significantly worse DPC latency. I'll go over what these actually mean later in the video, but for now all you need to know is that the lower, the better. But here's where it gets interesting. The frame rate limit. I used to say to ignore it if you're not stuttering in Fortnite, but with so many ways to limit your FPS, I recently discovered that the way you cap it can boost your 1% lows more than any optimization. And this is not an exaggeration. Just take a look at these benchmarks here. On the left, I'm getting very high 1% lows at 211 FPS, which is pretty impressive, because when I did the exact same benchmark with the frame cap at 240 FPS, it dipped all the way down to 163. Now at this point, you would think that you should uncap your FPS to get both higher average FPS and 1% lows. However, when I instead cap my FPS using Riva Tuner, it makes that 211 FPS look like nothing now that I'm getting 1% lows of 240 FPS. The 2 curious people who tested this after seeing my community post also saw similar results, dramatically boosting their 1% and 0.1% lows. I almost forgot to talk about latency. I mean, just look at the difference. Normally, I just use this software to show my FPS on screen, but now I honestly think that all of you should cap your FPS with it too. You might be wondering if there's a way to get this same effect without downloading anything, but the answer is not that simple. As you can see, results can vary wildly, depending on how you cap your FPS, whether you're using the in-game cap, NVIDIA control panel, or Riva Tuner. But since I'm seeing flawless results with Riva Tuner, I'm going to show you how to download and use it. But before you install anything on your PC, be sure to create a restore point in case you accidentally changed the wrong setting or install the wrong app. So press your Windows key and type in create a restore point. When you see this window, click on configure, turn on system protection, and slide the slider to make as much space as you need for restore points, since you might want to create multiple as you follow this guide. Once you're happy with that, click on apply and then OK. Next, click on create and name it something funny unless you're boring and lame and stupid and dumb. This might take upwards of 5 whole seconds, but when it's done, click on OK to close the window. So if you ever run into an issue during this video and can't fix it by yourself, you can access your restore point by going back to the same place you created it. However, even with a restore point, you should be wary of what you're downloading on the internet, but as long as you're not being dumb, you should be good to go. Anyways, if you want super stable 1% lows like me, I would recommend downloading Riva Tuner through the MSI Afterburner download page, which I will link in the description. On the website, just click on the final version because it will always be the most stable, and that's the version that I use as well. The setup is pretty straightforward. The only thing you'll have to watch out for is Norton 360, because that's just an obnoxious antivirus that we are not here to download. But when you see Riva Tuner, it should be checked automatically, and just proceed with the installation. Once you have both MSI Afterburner and Riva Tuner installed, open them both up. If they fail to open, they may be hiding in your system tray at the bottom right, so just click this up arrow and single click on their icons. When you have Afterburner opened, click on Settings, then start with Windows and start Minimized. This will be super convenient later on. Do the same thing with Riva Tuner by clicking the switch next to Start with Windows, then click on the blue Setup button and check off the box next to Start Minimized. After that, you will see the box next to Frame Rate Limit, and all you need to do there is click on 0, type in your target FPS, and press Enter. Once all of that is done, you should experience the smoothest gaming you've ever seen. Oh, and make sure you set your in-game frame limiter to unlimited if you forgot. However, no amount of FPS is going to save you if your ping sucks. So before we move on to the rest of the Fortnite settings, I'm going to show you how I get 0 ping on my own servers, 20 ping on NA Central, and 60 ping on EU. And the way I do it is with ExitLag. And to prove that it really does work, here I am in Fortnite at around 12 ping, which is very playable, but with ExitLag, I managed to drop that down to a single digit. As I've said time and time again, I've been recommending it ever since I accidentally discovered that it genuinely works, and I literally never play online video games without it. It's a software designed to reduce ping, latency, and packet loss, and whether your ping is too high or you're straight up lagging, now is the perfect time to give it a try because you can get yourself a free trial with no credit card information. So to get a free trial, head over to the link in the description, then click on Get ExitLag at the top right and scroll down. Click on Create an account, type in a name, email, and password. You can skip step 3 for now because we're just getting the free trial to see if it actually works for you, and it only needs your credit card information if you end up buying it. But once you've clicked on register, click on your name at the top right, and in that drop down menu, click on download. Then click on download ExitLag and follow the super easy installation steps. When you open the app though, it should look just like this. So scroll down a little bit and press on Optimize Game. Select the game you want to optimize your connection for, select your region, and apply routes for the lowest possible latency. If the free trial worked for you, now is the best time to subscribe because there's currently a 50% sale on the annual plan. So be sure to click the link in the description or scan the QR code to check out. Now let's get back to the Fortnite settings. Next is rendering mode, and unless you get FPS drops in performance mode, I would recommend performance mode because it has several advantages over DX12. DX12 has much longer render times, which makes building and editing significantly harder. And if you've ever actually tried playing on DX12, you know exactly what I'm talking about here. Despite DX12 offering more settings, multiple settings are linked to the view distance setting, even impacting hair physics. So if you want your builds to be low meshes with minimal visual effects, you need to have near view distance. But if you want to see items from further away, it forces you to have high meshes. So performance mode is the clear winner. The next 5 settings have absolutely no impact on your performance, so it is all personal preference. What can make an impact though is 3D resolution. For those of you who are on laptops or budget PCs, you might see an FPS increase by decreasing your 3D resolution, because it changes how many pixels your computer is rendering in every frame. However, it is important to note that this percentage affects both height and width. For example, if you have a 1440p monitor and set the percentage to 50%, that will change your game resolution to 720p, even though the pixel count of 720p is a lot less than 50% of 1440p. However, if you aren't seeing any performance issues at 100% like in my case, you will gain absolutely nothing from decreasing your 3D resolution. And the only thing that's going to change is your GPU usage. But for me personally, I paid for the whole GPU, so I'm going to use the whole GPU. View distance is an interesting one because it does affect performance a tiny bit in some cases, like if you're playing on a laptop with integrated graphics, but otherwise it's personal preference and I like to leave it on far. Textures is a weird setting because Fortnite is the only game where I start to stutter when I turn it up to max settings, so leave this on low. The meshes setting is also up to you, but keep in mind that high meshes does give you a performance hit. And of course, show your FPS and disable report performance stats. Next thing we're going to do is go into the game settings, the 4th tab at the top, and scroll down until you see the replay settings. You'll see that Epic Games themselves state that recording replays can reduce performance and take up hard drive space. But if you're on a capable PC, this actually has no effect on performance at all. When I compared having all the replay settings on to having them all off, I actually recorded higher FPS with high quality replays on. This was likely due to margin of error, but that just goes to show that not all these optimizations will work for everyone. In conclusion, leave replays off if you don't need them, but if you want to record replays, it probably won't make too much of a difference as long as your PC is capable enough. That's it for the Fortnite settings, so let's get into some essential Windows optimizations that you need to do on your PC. These are a lot of simple one-click switches, but for the little time it takes to do these, I definitely think these are all worth doing. But one very important warning before we start, do not copy exactly what I do without testing these optimizations yourself. Copying my tweaks word for word is like following my hair care routine when we all have completely different hair types. Every PC is different and what works for me might not work the same for you. The point of this video is to show you what actually affects your latency and FPS so you can tweak these settings on your own system. Now that we're looking at latency numbers, I think this would be a good time to actually explain what each of these values actually mean, starting with ISR ISR execution. An ISR is an interrupt service routine. In Fortnite terms, it's the first step of detecting a mouse click, and the ISR reacts so that your PC detects the action with minimal delay. DPC routines run after the ISR to handle screen updates and playing sound effects. After the ISR detects the click, the DPC processes the animation and sound. The DPC latency is how long this processing takes, and if the DPC latency is too high, this can cause video stutters and audio cutouts. And finally, interrupt to process latency. This is the total time from when you click your mouse to when Fortnite processes the input and updates the screen. When you click to shoot, the game has to recognize the input, process it, and actually show it all happening in-game. If this latency is too high, your builds, edits, and shots will feel delayed. If any of these types of latencies sound like something you want to reduce, be sure to pay attention to the Pro, ISR, and DPC numbers. Let's start with debloating your computer to improve your gaming performance and overall system responsiveness. This is mostly useful on a brand new Windows install, but if you've already debloated your computer, this part of the video will realistically not do shit. For those of you who haven't debloated your Windows though, we're gonna start by using the Titus Tech Utility because it's completely safe and you don't need to download anything. First, we need to open Windows PowerShell. To open it, just press Windows plus X and click on Terminal Admin. From here, you just need to copy and paste the script from the description of the video and press enter. Once it's done loading, it should look something like this. You can download and uninstall pretty much any useful software you can think of from this page, but for now, we're just gonna go to the tweak section at the top, because that's where most of my performance boost comes from. If you wanna get it over with super quick, just click on standard or minimal at the top, then click run tweaks at the bottom. This gets 90% of the job done in about 2 seconds. But for the rest of you who wanna use the same optimizations as myself, I'm gonna show you and explain what settings I personally use. Of course, we're gonna create another restore point in case anything goes wrong, clear out the temp folder, and disable consumer features. If you're on Windows 10, this will be important as this will prevent Windows from automatically installing things on your computer. But for Windows 11 users like me, checking the box doesn't do anything. I just leave it checked for the sake of checking a box. Next is disabling Microsoft telemetry, and in simple terms, telemetry collects and sends info from your computer to Microsoft to help them improve their software, which is great for them, but it's an invasive process that does affect your computer's performance negatively. Next, we're going to turn off activity history. When it's on, your computer keeps track of the apps you use, websites you visit, and files you open. And this information is uploaded online to your Microsoft account. By turning it off, your computer stops tracking these things, both improving your privacy and reducing unnecessary background tasks. I would also turn off game DVR. The only reason you would ever need to worry about this is if you play any games downloaded from the Microsoft Store, but if you don't, then turning this off is a no-brainer. Hibernation is a laptop feature, so if you're on desktop, it's up to you whether or not you want to disable it because you do get a slight performance uplift, especially if you're using a hard drive instead of an SSD. But if you're on a laptop, leave it alone no matter what. Disabling home group is also a no-brainer. It's likely that your version of Windows doesn't even have it installed as it was removed since Windows 10 version 1803. But just like consumer features, you might as well check the box anyways. Prefer IPv4 over IPv6 is a network optimization. Some people will say to just fully disable IPv6, but that will break some Windows functions, so that's why it's recommended to do this instead. Then disable location tracking because you don't need it, disable storage sense to free up some CPU cycles, disable Wi-Fi sense as it's a spying service, enable ntask with right click because it's super useful when one of your apps stop responding, run disk cleanup to remove your previous Windows updates, replace PowerShell 5 with 7, and disable PowerShell 7 telemetry for the same reasons as Microsoft telemetry. I used to make fun of recall, but apparently it's a huge privacy concern. Massive even. So definitely disable that. Set hibernation as default if you're on a laptop and set services to manual. Setting them to manual only activates them when you need them, again giving your PC some more performance. And finally, for the essential tweaks, click on Debloat Edge. In the advanced tweaks, I would recommend only disabling Adobe Network Block, Adobe Debloat, disable background apps, and disable Microsoft Copilot. I'm sure there's more you can do here, but I have yet to test them personally, so I'm not going to tell you to do them just because they could possibly break some Windows features. In the Customize Preferences section, you can copy my exact settings if you want your Windows to look just like mine. Just before we finish up, click this to apply the Ultimate Performance Power Plan. Once all that is done, click on Run Tweaks, and it'll take between a few seconds and a few minutes depending on what options you chose. Now for Power Plans. You might think that we're just going to stay on the Ultimate Performance Power Plan, but since power plans have a pretty big impact on both latency and frame rate, we're going to spend some time to help you pick from the multiple viable options. Let's begin with finding out which one gives you the highest raw FPS using the max FPS test. On average, the best power plan in terms of raw FPS goes to the Ultimate Performance Power Plan with an average frame rate of 921 and a 1% low of 444, easily beating out every other power plan tested today. But does the Ultimate Performance Power Plan win in latency? After running the same exact replay 3 times for each benchmark, I found that the High Performance Plan had the edge over everyone in ISR execution, V-Troll had the best performance in DPC, and the Ultimate Performance Power Plan comes out on top yet again for interrupt to process latency. In conclusion, the Ultimate Performance Power Plan is the best for process latency, has the overall best average placement in every category, has the highest average FPS, and the best 1% lows. That's all for the power plans, so let's move on to the rest of the Windows optimizations. Next, we'll disable memory integrity in the core isolation settings. It has been proven time and time again that FPS increases with these settings off, and it seems like latency is better as well. Even Microsoft acknowledges that this security feature can slow down your PC. Why? Because it uses hardware virtualization to create an isolated environment, almost like running everything in a virtual machine. To disable memory integrity, press your Windows key and type in core isolation. And as you could probably expect, the other settings in here are also unnecessary security features. However, you might have noticed that Microsoft Vulnerable Driver Block List is grayed out, but all you need to do is restart your PC after turning off memory integrity. Then you can disable it. Next, press your Windows key, type in game mode, press enter, and turn on game mode. People have been calling this a placebo for years, but I got way worse delay with it off, so definitely try turning it on. From here, click on graphics, then change default graphics settings. If you chose to play on windowed full screen, turn off optimizations for windowed games. But if you chose to play on exclusive full screen, this will not affect you. According to Microsoft themselves, it should give you better frame latency on DX10 and 11 games, and it just so happens that Fortnite Performance Mode runs on DX11. So why would I recommend against turning this on? Well, according to my results, Microsoft appears to be capping as we are getting worse latency across the board. Though process latency is the main thing we're looking for when it comes to frame latency, the difference we're seeing here is under 2 microseconds. And in the other 2 categories, we are seeing much worse numbers. You might also see a setting in here called hardware accelerated GPU scheduling. In simple terms, it just puts more work onto the GPU instead of the CPU. The majority of people should be turning this on, especially for Fortnite, as it is a CPU based game. And basically anything that offloads workloads onto your GPU will help boost your frame rates. I've seen some people say that it's not good for VR due to some encoding issues, but it's very likely that NVIDIA has dealt with this bug since then, because you cannot use frame generation, a feature that NVIDIA constantly advertises, without this setting turned on. I couldn't help but notice though that the RAM and VRAM usage both increase significantly with HAGS on. So just like the other optimizations in this video, I would personally test this setting separately from the others, and it will not be the same on different games. Moving on to the NVIDIA control panel. For those of you who do not have an NVIDIA graphics card, skip this entire chapter of the video. You might have seen a few YouTubers talk about how NVIDIA control panel is outdated and no longer affects newer games. However, it doesn't take much to prove that it still affects performance in Fortnite. After 3 test runs with and without optimizations on both my RTX 4000 Ada and my RTX 3060 laptop, we saw anywhere from 2 to 10% better performance just from spending 3 minutes on the control panel. Start by opening the NVIDIA control panel, then double click on Manage 3D Settings. Now I can't guarantee that these changes won't affect other games, especially older ones, but since this is a Fortnite specific video, we're going to customize the settings just for Fortnite to avoid confusion. So go to Program Settings, click Add, and select Fortnite. If you don't see it, I'll leave the Fortnite directory in the description for you to copy. Just press Browse, paste it into File Explorer, and select the game. That's exactly what I'll be doing today as well. But just before we change the Fortnite specific settings, there's one global setting we should change first, so click on Global Settings and scroll down until you see Shader Cache Size. Adjusting shader cache size to 10 GB has historically helped people with stuttering, and it is likely that you might even see an increase in frame rate. You can change it to 100 GB for sure, but it's almost impossible to fill that up, and it's just going to take up space on your drives. Now we're ready to go back into the program settings. Set image scaling and ambient occlusion off. These are both completely unnecessary for competitive gaming. Leave anisotropic filtering to application controlled. It basically makes textures look better from different angles, and leaving it on application controlled allows Fortnite to handle anisotropic filtering. Anti-aliasing FXAA should be left off. Anti-aliasing is used to smooth out edges, and although FXAA is one of the least demanding forms of it, it's still something you should have disabled. And just like FXAA, these other anti-aliasing settings should be turned off for Fortnite. Background application max frame rate is self-explanatory, leave this off. CUDA GPUs is set to all, but for those of you with multiple, then pick whichever one you want the game to run on. CUDA sysmem fallback policy is not even worth explaining for Fortnite because you will almost never run out of VRAM in this game, but this basically tells your GPU what to do if you run out of VRAM, so I leave it on driver default. Low latency mode is off for now as we're looking for the best possible frame rate, but having it on never hurt in my experience. Max frame rate is off because Riva Tuner is much better for capping FPS, at least for me, and MFAA is off for the same reason as FXAA. OpenGL GDI compatibility set to auto is usually best, and OpenGL rendering GPU can be left on auto unless you have multiple graphics cards. Power management mode is on prefer maximum performance. I've never ran into any issues setting this on prefer maximum performance as someone who has used some of the lowest power GPUs in the market, such as the 80W RTX 3060 laptop GPU and a 70W RTX 4000 SFF Ada. It is still possible that you might get worse performance here, but if you're skeptical, you can always mess around with it. Preferred refresh rate is the highest available because we're capping our FPS using Riva Tuner for better performance anyways. Texture filtering anisotropic sample optimization is on. This reduces processing load without really affecting your game. Texture filtering negative LOD bias is on allow by default, and out of the two options, this gives you the best performance. Texture filtering quality is on high performance because we don't need high quality textures in Fortnite. Texture filtering trilinear optimization is on for the same reason as anisotropic sample optimization. Threaded optimization is said to be a feature that takes advantage of several processor cores at once, and it's kind of across the board because it depends on your CPU. I personally leave it on auto, but feel free to mess around with it. Triple buffering, much like VSync, helps with screen tearing, but introduces input lag. I don't know a single person who has this on because it is completely useless in comp games. And as I mentioned just now, vertical sync should almost always be off. Again, I don't know a single person who has this on. Both VR settings are at their default settings, and finally Vulkan/OpenGL present method is on auto. For my AMD viewers, you guys are blessed to not have to deal with a software that looks like it hasn't been updated since 2009. But before we start, let me show you my results so you know what to expect. Although the average FPS increase was within the margin of error and the 1% lows only went up by 2%, the efficiency boost you get by optimizing your AMD software is incredible. Take a quick look at the RAM and VRAM usage. Yeah, it's kind of crazy that we're using a gigabyte less of each. So to quickly optimize your GPU, just right click on your desktop and open AMD software. To optimize your GPU specifically for Fortnite, click on Gaming, Games, and then Fortnite. But if you already have Fortnite running in the background, the Fortnite specific settings will show up automatically. We're actually going to ignore all these graphics settings and go straight into advanced. On texture filtering quality, set that to performance to prioritize performance over image quality. Surface format optimization lets your GPU use more efficient formats to improve performance and reduce video memory usage. To make this make more sense, think of image files and how they have their own different formats like JPEG and PNG. Basically what this setting does is it allows your GPU to automatically choose the best formats for each texture and render surface for best performance and efficiency, giving you better FPS and lower VRAM usage. It's best to keep it enabled for smoother gameplay. For tessellation mode, we are going to override the Fortnite settings and set our maximum tessellation level to off. Tessellation basically adds more detail and depth to surfaces by subdividing geometry and applying displacement maps. But as you can see here, it's almost impossible to notice from distance. However, adding a 2% FPS increase just from one setting is pretty good. The last thing we're going to do is click on the settings cog, click preferences, and disable all of this nonsense. And that's it. Restart your PC and you're good to go. Now for some BIOS tweaks. To get into the BIOS, restart your computer, then while it boots up, hold or spam the F2 or delete key until you get in. If those don't work, just hold down shift while pressing restart, then select troubleshoot, advanced options, UEFI firmware settings, and click restart. Probably the most popular BIOS tweak is enabling XMP, Expo, DOCP, or AXMP, and there's a high chance that you were told to turn this on in the past, but for those of you who don't know what it does or avoided it until now, having it disabled only slows down your RAM speeds, and by turning it on, I'm able to get my 6000 mega transfers that I paid for instead of 4800. There are some RAM sticks that don't support this technology, but for the vast majority of you, this will significantly boost your FPS. Usually, the setting to turn this on is right in your face when you get into the BIOS, and if you're struggling to find it, it's probably not your fault. Your PC most likely doesn't support it. And after you're done turning this on, save and boot back into Windows to make sure that your PC is still working properly. The next BIOS tweak is a pretty common one as well, disabling hyperthreading on Intel CPUs or SMT on AMD CPUs. But for Fortnite specifically, I think you should actually enable both of these settings. My Intel laptop was actually performing really well after a clean reset, but after turning off hyperthreading, everything became worse, so I ended up re-enabling it. You would think that it couldn't get any worse on AMD, but I got worse performance with SMT disabled, and my PC put itself into automatic repair because of it. This took me an hour to fix, so if you ask me, I would definitely leave both hyperthreading and SMT on and never touch it again. But not everyone's PC is going to be the same, and it is an option for a reason, so you might as well try it. And that's everything I had for today, so if you found this helpful or think I missed something, let me know down in the comments.